Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing for Monday, 30th of May. With us today is Alison McConnell. How's things, Alison? Good weekend?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Just fairly busy. I was through at Tynecastle yesterday for the game, so it was a late return.
Good. Yeah, I mean, before we start, as always, I'll give a wee word to our sponsors. One Football, as you can see on the screen. The app totally free, one-stop shop for all your footballing needs, as we always say. That's news, fixtures, opposition stats, etc. Available on Apple, Android, all of those. So we thank them for their sponsorship as always. And as you can see just underneath it, we're still running a special offer just now, which is 30 days of full access to the website for free. So if you go to www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe, you'll be able to take advantage of that as well. And I'll put the link in the comments for that too. But that leads us on nicely, Alison, to our first topic, because you were at the Celtic women's game yesterday, and we'll have a piece going up on that website shortly about it, won't you? I mean, what did you make of it all at Tynecastle as Fran Alonso's side clinched a cup double, both of which were over Glasgow City?
Yeah, I thought it was a very bold performance. I thought they'd done particularly well. I think when you consider they played 79 minutes with a numerical disadvantage, I think on a big pitch, a wide pitch, and these are players who tend to train and play mostly on AstroTurf, so I think playing on grass could probably be a bit heavier on the legs, but I thought they were particularly resilient. I think there was a belief about the performance. I think it was a fairly balanced game. I think both teams would feel as though they had chances to win it. Charlie Wellings, you'd have put your mortgage on her scoring just in the closing stages of regulation time. She rounded Lee Alexander and then just put too much on the ball, and just a wild effort that she lashed over the bar. Probably the best chance in the latter stages of the game. But I think Celtic deserve enormous credit. I think for Glasgow City to have come back twice into the game, and then for Celtic to go again, having played so long with a player down, I thought they were deserving of it. And I think they'll take great heart from it, and it raises a question now already about next season and where they go from here.
When we spoke on Friday previewing the game, I kind of said that these finals, especially as the last game of the season, are good not only for the actual trophy on offer, obviously, but as almost like an advert for the game as well. And that was a cracker then in that case, wasn't it? I mean, goals, drama. There was a bumper crowd, which 4,500 or so, which was a record for the final. I mean, that is a great advert.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought it was a very open game. I think Fran Alonso had said on Friday that what you would see is two teams who wanted to win the game rather than a team that was frightened to lose, and I think that manifested itself in the display. I think both teams really did go for it, even when Celtic were down to 10 players. I thought they were still.
The commentator kept saying that as well on BBC.
I thought they were still fairly aggressive in terms of their forward play and still quite bold in trying to find a killer third goal at that point. But I think overall they'll be very satisfied at the season. I think that's the first time they've ever won the Scottish Cup. To come away with a double, to add it to the League Cup, I think is a very successful season. I think it's interesting now. You had Rangers winning the league, having gone through the campaign unbeaten. Celtic finished in third, City second, and Celtic taking both cups. And you just wonder now, with the resources that Celtic and Rangers have, if you see the same pattern developing in the women's game as you've seen in the men's game, with Celtic and Rangers just dominating the domain, really. And I hope not in some ways. I think you would like to see a very competitive league. I think Glasgow City have really dominated the landscape for so long, but what you have the opportunity now is for a much more competitive league with teams capable of pushing them, as you've seen this season. And I think it'll be very, very interesting how they respond over the summer now.
In terms of performances, individual performances, I suspect it might be the team as a whole that would get the credit. But in terms of individual performances, who stood out to you? I mean, Charlie Welling scored their 40th of the campaign and got player of the match. But what were your thoughts? Were there other players that stood out?
Caitlin Hayes, for me, was excellent. I thought she was absolutely phenomenal. She obviously had had much more work to do in a defensive context once Jodie Bartlett had been sent off. I thought she was excellent. She ran herself into the ground, very composed on the ball, still going. I think she was carrying a very slight back injury. A couple of times I saw her getting treatment after regulation time in between the two halves of extra time. But for me, I thought she was probably player of the match. For me, I thought Kelly Clark had a very good game. I think there was a few you could point out. Charlie Wellings, I think, scoring her, the 40th goal of the campaign. There were a number of performers that I think you could see really contributed hugely to the win. And I think that's what you would say. I think if you were to reflect in the game and come away from it, I think the real big performances for me tended to come from the Celtic side.
For me, admittedly, watching it in the house with a baby on my lap, I took two main things from the kind of Celtic performance specifically, and that was the absolute grit and concentration levels of those players required for most of the game after, as you mentioned, going a player down, but also the ability to kind of adapt their style of play after going to a player disadvantage. Izzy Atkinson, who scored the winner, obviously said after the game that Fran Alonso had them preparing and training for going down to 10, and the game plan of kind of going long to runners, but obviously with a deliberate kind of ploy rather than just hitting it long and hoping. I think it worked well off the back of that. Now, obviously, the actual winner, it was a through ball. It wasn't necessarily just lumping it long from the back. But to speak about the winner for a minute, Sarah Harks, got to mention her for that. The turn alone was class, but the through ball as well put it straight into the path of Atkinson, and obviously the finish. The finish was not bad either, was it? But in terms of Hart's contribution to that, I watched it a few times, and the turn in the middle, but obviously at that stage of the game, to show that poise, that calmness, and then the technique to actually put it on not so much on a plate, but certainly give Atkinson every chance. It was worthy of a cup final win and assist, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought it was excellent. It almost seemed to take the whole City midfield out that turn. It seemed to give her so much space. But the weight of the pass was perfect for Atkinson to get on the end of, and I thought she had struggled a bit in the game at times since coming on. She's very slight. She's a winger. She's not a forward. But she was asked to go up and kind of help out Charlie Wings. I thought she had struggled at points in the game, but she took it perfectly. It's that first touch just to buy herself a bit of time, a bit of composure, realised the space she had, and she was saying to us after it that she saw the goalkeeper's legs opening and she just thought, I know what I'm doing, I know where I'm going with it. And I think you could see Glasgow City, they were spent by that point, they were really the body language and everything, like they were just absolutely exhausted. He played 112 minutes of football, a fairly humid day too. To be fair to them, I thought they rallied. I thought they really threw everything at it again the last 7 or 8 minutes. I thought they tried to go again, but I just thought they had lost something in those last few minutes.
I thought in terms of Glasgow City, I thought Davidson looked the kind of the danger, if you know what I mean, the left wing play that she was pulling up. I think maybe she took an extra couple of touches a couple of times where maybe releasing the ball early would have put the Celtic defence under more pressure. But that said, the delivery still did come in, and the Celtic defence defended like the best compliment I can give them was it was like see Chiellini, the way Chiellini likes to defend, the last ditch stuff, celebrating it as if it was the last ditch stuff. I like seeing it. I like that kind of thing. Some call me sad. I like it. I like seeing that kind of defending as well. But that set a platform that enabled the likes of Harks to kind of set up Atkinson for the winner. And I think I said at the start when I said who stood out to you, but I think ultimately it is the team as a whole after going one player down, isn't it? Fran Alonso getting a lot of the credit after it as well, and as I said, Atkinson mentioning that he prepared them for that situation. This comment from David Bradley, this kind of ties in with what you were kind of referring to on Friday, and again what you maybe referred to a couple of minutes ago. Winning league's easy is over now. Obviously, Rangers won the league unbeaten. Celtic have won both cups. Glasgow City have headed up trophies for the first time in yonks. So, given that Celtic had never won the Scottish Women's Cup before, and that they're even thinking about their SWPL Cup win a few months ago was the first trophy since 2010 full stop, it's a massive testament to the progress that they're making under Fran Alonso. But would you agree that would be the case even if they didn't win on Sunday? I mean, I suppose now that they have, the question is, what's next for them? Is it the league?
I think it certainly has to be a viable ambition. I think Rangers and Glasgow City really pulled ahead of the pack this term, post-Christmas, just towards the turn of the year. I think Celtic stuttered a couple of draws that cost them. But I definitely think they'll have designs now on the league. I think it has to be an ambition. Last year they finished second, took it to the very last day. And to be fair to Glasgow City, Rangers have a much bigger budget than City, and they took it right up to the wire again. What you would say about City is that it's a team with a winning mentality. It's a culture of winning that's been fostered over the last couple of decades that are there. I think it will be very intriguing to see just what happens over the summer. I think they'll be smarting from finishing it trophyless. I think you could see it yesterday when Celtic were celebrating. They were handing the cup. They stood, they waited for them, they applauded them. But you could see the devastation on their faces. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens now and how they react and what their recruitment is like over the summer. And the same would be said for Celtic too. In terms of the recruitment and just finding a bit of consistency. I think one of the real problems for Celtic this season, seems absurd to say it about creating chances when you've got someone there who scored 40 goals, but I think the stats showed that I think Celtic had the most possession in games of all the teams in the league, the most successful passes made, but what they really struggled with this term was a midfield player who could just have that little bit of creativity, just maybe a number 10, someone just to tee up things. I think just if they could bring in a fairly creative midfielder, I think it could really make the difference because they have goal scorers there, but in some games they really struggle to create enough chances and to take them when they had them.
That I'm going to use that as a segue. That kind of leads us on to my next topic. Speaking of someone who has a wee bit of creativity and also wins leagues, Callum McGregor had some interesting comments while away in Scotland due to Alison. He was asked about basically the sheer volume of games that he plays season after season. After a FIFA Pro report mentioned him as one example of a player, carrying a massive load in terms of minutes played. Now, in response to that, he used the example of Cristiano Ronaldo playing so often at 37, and he said it just shows that you're doing something right and that naturally he doesn't want to not be involved in big games, etc. He also used the phrase, "I'm pretty old school," and that sometimes it becomes mind over matter. Now, Alison, that's very much an attitude most top players still share. But my question to you on it is kind of twofold. One, at what point does it become about protecting a player from himself as much as anything else in terms of making sure that they manage their minutes loads more evenly? And then two, how does Celtic actually do that when McGregor is potentially irreplaceable in that team as well as being a captain?
Yeah, I would agree with you on both fronts. And I think I would probably point to the example of James Forrest. I think James Forrest had a similar run a few seasons ago where I think he had 3 or 4 seasons where he was in excess of the 55, 60 games over the course of a campaign. And I do think it catches up and I do think it takes a toll. I appreciate what Callum McGregor's saying. I think you want to play, you want to be involved. It's not a chore to play and you want to just go on with it. But I do think eventually it does catch up with you. I think it is very difficult just now for Celtic to give him a rest because he is so influential to the side, to the way that they play. He's incredibly pivotal. But I think that report was all about maybe trying to, correct me if I'm wrong, but trying to get players a proper break. Was an argument for saying that they need a block of maybe 4 weeks at least recovery. And I think Callum McGregor was one of 15 players who had been named as playing in excess of 55 games or so. And I think it's sensible. I think he will need a break after the international games this week. I think he'll most definitely need a proper break. And I suppose a good thing about this season is Celtic can afford to give him longer than would be normal because you're not coming back for earlier Champions League qualifiers. So you would like to think that there will be the possibility maybe of a good month off because I think he probably does need it mentally as much as anything.
that's something else that he mentioned. The mental side of it, says he always feels fine. That's always the case until it's not the case, though. Is what I would say. I as I always do, I kind of dug into the minutes played and all that a wee bit. So see, since the Invincible season, which actually was the fewest amount of minutes that he did play, that was just under 3,000. He's progressively, basically, he just constantly is over 5,000 minutes a season now. I've included club friendlies in that because although you don't include those for competitive stats and all of that, ultimately it's still minutes in the legs at that point. So over basically, as I say, since the Invincible season, he's played 29,373 minutes for club and international, right? So that's the equivalent. You know, I like to do this, turn into the minutes equivalent and stuff. That's the equivalent of just over 326 matches over 6 seasons, right? So that's over 54 full 90s per season. Not just appearances, but full 90s. So, because you know what it's like, we're saying it ourselves, there is very little that you can do to rotate him out of the team just now. Whenever we've done the kind of predicted lineups, it's always, well, McGregor, maybe move him to the 8 rather than actually rotate him out. It's never give him a rest. It's always, well, don't play him at the 6, but play him at the 8. So it's even us when we're talking about it, never really consider giving him a rest, even in the predicted 11s.
The real problem though comes if all of a sudden you find he's out for 3 months.
Yeah. They did lose him. I mean, these minutes are all. I mean, he was out earlier in the season for a wee while, and I think you see the difference. You do see the difference when he's not there, which is part of the problem. How do you rotate that out? He's a captain on top of it. You're right though to say that the FIFPro report, it did mention specifically. You're right. It did mention 4 weeks off in the summer. But again, that's going to be difficult. You can see it right now. It's difficult with tournaments, which is there isn't even a tournament now. It's in the winter. But qualifiers as well. Just taking in all of that, it just how do you do that? How do you make sure he gets 4 weeks off with the schedule that's there, as well as limiting the amount of the other thing they said, was limiting the amount of kind of successive games that a player competes in. So consistently playing 2-3 times a week. Again, in the example of McGregor that we were using, it's hard to see where that's going to be the case in Celtic's schedule.
Especially for the first half of the season.
Yeah.
Especially when they go back at first. And I think, we'd all like to see Scotland qualifying and get past Ukraine and then get past Wales next weekend and make it to the World Cup. But Callum McGregor would be one of those who would be heavily involved again there. If Scotland were successful and going to the World Cup, then, he would be pivotal to Steve Clarke too. But even that aside, I think as soon as this season starts, it starts like a train. You're in and you're straight into the 3 games a week. Really, I think the only breaks midweek until the World Cup are for international weekends or for friendlies and preparatory weekends. There is very, very few free weekends, free midweeks in that schedule. It's very intense because obviously it's an odd campaign because of the timing of the World Cup.
That comment from Retro Celtic is, it is fair comment, but it's almost oversimplifying it. Who is his future replacement? That would need. It's right now, as I say, whether you're saying he's playing the 6 or he's playing the 8, it's never really rest him. So I don't think there is a ready-made replacement to bring in now to help. It's obviously a hypothetical. You can always recruit, and whether there's someone in the B team or the youth team that would be potentially able to do it, it's easier said than done when you're the captain as well as the best midfielder, the driving force. That's my worry was reading the comments. Is it's easier said than done, basically, to rotate a player like Callum McGregor out of a team, and that has obviously over the last 6 seasons, even when he's picked up a couple of injuries, led to him playing the amount of football that I referenced. Yeah,
I would agree. I think it is very difficult to come out, and I'm sure he'll see it as a compliment, the fact that he's relied upon so heavily. But I do think, even if it comes to the point where Celtic are in top domestically in games, that there's maybe scope to take him off, even if it's 20 minutes, half an hour to go, just to try and give him a breather. Because I think inevitably at some point, there's a piper waiting to be paid down the line somewhere, and I think sometimes that manifests itself as very niggly muscular injuries, is pulls and tears. It can be difficult to properly heal when you're using it all the time, when you're being asked to maybe come back quicker. So I think it would be sensible. I think, though, the sports science department, I'm sure, will have the numbers, will have the figures. I'm sure that they'll be cognizant of the pressure physically on him, and you would like to think that that it's managed accordingly. I think he's a sensible boy. I think he's a kind of player that I think is responsive to what people are asking him to do in terms of recovery, which is very important. I think I think he gives an impression of taking all that information on board and then applying it. And I think probably he must, because otherwise you can't play with that regularity without it. So I think he's probably managing it well enough. In the immediate future, I think you would like to see him given some kind of a break.
That term, load management, is something, I like watching basketball and stuff. So that's you're going to hear it a lot in football over the next few years, I reckon, because it's constant in basketball. Where, Callum McGregor used the example of Cristiano Ronaldo, who's 37. I would use the example of LeBron James in basketball. They play back-to-backs all the time, play an 82-game season. He very rarely ever gets anywhere near that 82 games because he knows he's got to balance his load as he gets older. That's probably why the longevity he's kind of pulled that off. It's top players in football. They do manage their loads. Callum McGregor's used the kind of example of Cristiano Ronaldo. Style of play matters to me when it comes to load management too. Now, they're nowhere near the same age. And if Callum McGregor's still playing like this at 37, he'll have done magnificently to still be doing it. But regardless, the style of play, totally different, I think, to compare the way that Ronaldo plays as a centre forward and switch positions as he got older to Callum McGregor playing central midfield for a ball-dominant attacking Celtic team. Can they ever really rest him to any great extent when he plays that role? I don't think so. I think what you say is probably the closest they'll get, giving him 20 minutes if they're 3-0 up or something. You've also got to remember that players like Ronaldo or even like LeBron James that I'm mentioning with basketball spend millions a year to make sure, out with club stuff, spend millions a year to make sure that their bodies are taking them into their late 30s. It's a different thing. I don't think the comparison, even though he made it himself, was fair.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I appreciate what you're saying. I think so much is about education too, how you look after yourself, what your diet's like, how much water you're taking in, are you getting enough rest? I think that's probably the best way, if you're inclined and think you've got the wherewithal physically to keep playing. I think that's absolutely uppermost in your thinking is basically how you live your life. It's almost monastic in some ways. I think it's probably, quite clean, quite boring. I think it's probably very much focused on preparing and recovering all the time. I would agree with what you say. I think in terms of what position you're playing, where you're playing, what you're doing in games, but he does do a lot of running. I think if you to look at it, his running stats would be interesting to read, I think, too. He covers a lot of ground. But realistically, I think there's an argument for saying he needs an extended rest. Does he get it? I don't know how. I think he could probably get a good block of time now after next weekend if Celtic if Scotland go through past Ukraine. I think he would maybe get a break after the Wales game, and Celtic aren't back as early as what they would be in normal circumstances. But throughout the course of the campaign, it's very difficult to see where a natural break comes.
I agree. I think this is one where you're going to need to look. I agree with you. I think that is the only time. But then when you factor in if Scotland get to the World Cup, there will be no other break until this time next year, you would think.
There's no
part of the problem.
Yeah, it is part of the problem. And then I think sometimes what you see is players who go away and play in European Championships, playing World Cups. It's maybe 6-7 months after that, the following season, where you see niggling injuries come to the fore. You see a higher amount of particular injuries, and it's basically just because of overuse. So I think you have to proceed with caution while trying to manage it as best as possible.
So on that note, hopefully Callum McGregor is on the bench on Wednesday. But
not a chance.
I know. Right, before we head, yes, another reminder that, as you can see running down the bottom there, we are running the special offer. 30 days of full access to the website for free. So if you go to www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe, you'll be able to take advantage of that. I'd say it's cheap as chips, but it's literally costing nothing for 30 days, so it's even better than that. But yeah, keep an eye on the website as always. Alison's column on the Women's Cup final will be going up shortly. There's a new analysis piece from Alan Morrison already up there, and we've got plenty coming in the next few days. But for now, thanks for your comments as always, guys, and thanks for your contribution, Alison. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Thank you.